All right. Welcome, everybody. Happy Friday. Hope you all are having a wonderful week. Welcome to the very last live stream of 2023. I was sitting here thinking I'm shooting some videos and going through some comments and just getting myself prepared and ready for the year that's to come. And I thought to myself, I should probably take a minute to check in on everybody before I head out for the holidays and just see how y'all are doing. So, got my phone on do not disturb. So let me know if you're watching right now, where you are watching from in the world. And today should be a lot of fun. I'll probably join you all for maybe about 45 minutes to an hour, just depending on, questions and all that good stuff. Let me know in the comments, by the way. Can you hear me? Do I sound okay? Am I talking to myself? Awesome. Andrea, how's it going? Great live stream today, by the way. Columbus, Ohio. Good. So y'all can hear me. And so I've got the A9 III here in the studio. And so I'm going to be answering questions. I'm actually working on a very specific video because there's so much to this camera, so many new things, so many new features, and I have a very limited window of time to be able to just kind of use it and figure these things out. So I've really kind of focused in on this flash sync that this camera offers. For those of you who may or may not know, when it comes to flash photography, cameras typically can only sync up to 1/200th, maybe 1/250th of a second on most DSLRs, most mirrorless cameras. Something like the Sony Alpha 1 goes up to 1/400th of a second, which is pretty. When it came out, it was like, oh my gosh, you could do 1/400th of a second. That's awesome. And then here we are, just a couple years later, basically, with the new Alpha 9 III, and we can sync anywhere from 1/16,000th at a max, depending on what aperture you choose, all the way up to 1/80,000th of a second, which is very interesting. And it's led to a lot of interesting conversations. So let's see. Let's go through these comments here really quick. Columbus, Ohio, welcome. We've got Norway in the house. North Carolina, good to see you. David is watching from Boston. I was just up there. Let's see. Burlington, New Jersey. Miss my old stomping grounds in New Jersey. Let's see. Watching from Florida. Have really enjoyed learning from you. Best wishes for the holidays. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to hear that. Best wishes to you as well. And hopefully we'll have some, good times in the new year. Let's see. Andrea was asking, where can we see some of your image samples? So I'm probably going to end up creating a blog post on my website, which is miguelquiles.com. I've kind of toyed around with the idea of just kind of posting the raw shots and just seeing, just kind of going from there. But yeah, that's kind of the plan. In the latest Alpha Universe video, you could see some of the images within that video. But as far as seeing like full res samples, I'll probably end up posting it on my website. Dan the Man Watson, good to see you, buddy. Hope you and the family are doing well. Watching from next door. Dude, you need to be like, we need to get together. I know we've been talking about this now for like 3+ years. We need to make this happen. We're literally neighbors. No excuses. So anyway, so a few things, a few updates. One of the things that I've been working on is actually going back to the beginning of the year. I was thinking about creating a membership website where I can get more in depth and kind of go into like, specific tutorials, like things people want to learn, and just really take the time to like craft that content and do it in a way that's free of sponsors and all that good stuff. That was supposed to be in July. I was working on that for a while, and then I kind of shifted gears a little bit, mainly because it just got very busy and I didn't really have the time and couldn't put the attention to building out this site the way that I wanted to. So in the interim, I decided to start doing the YouTube membership program. So if you go onto my YouTube channel, you're going to see a little join button. I created 3 different tiers. And the idea is that if you want to support the channel, if you want to support the things that I'm doing, you can become a member. I think the lowest tier is maybe a couple of dollars. Some of the higher tiers are going to give you some better things, like you'll get access to a once a month live stream, which is going to be limited only to those members. And what's really cool about that is, typically you would have to go to like a big conference to watch like, a full on photo shoot and to be able to ask questions live. And with YouTube and with all the gear that I have here for live streaming, I was thinking it would just be great for me to just live stream photo shoots from my studio, and you could see how I work. You could ask me questions. If you have ideas and you want to see how it would turn out, you can influence the outcome of those photo shoots, which is very fun. So this is just stuff that I want to do to try to help the community and, do it in a way that makes sense. And one of the other things too is also giving early access to my videos. I'm going to start creating exclusive content as well here on YouTube that's going to be for members only. Things that are not necessarily that don't have to be so highly produced. And so that's one of the things that's coming. And I haven't talked about it in any videos. This is actually the first time publicly that I'm talking about. But if that's something you want to get into, click the join button and check that out. Let's see. Cooley was asking, is there an L bracket that fits a Nikon D750? There's actually universal L brackets. I have one, and I mainly bought it because every time a new camera comes out, I didn't like having to buy a new L bracket, and so I bought a universal one. I'll see if I can find the link on Amazon for you after the video, but they do make them. Just look up universal L brackets and you should be able to find them. And it says with vertical grip. So the one that I have is just a basic L bracket, but you can use it vertical or horizontal, which is pretty sweet. Leah was asking, why does the A9 III not have an ISO less than 250? Your guess is as good as mine. That's just the way that they designed the sensor. Personally, having used the camera now for several photo shoots, I don't think it's a problem, right? We're talking a stop and a third difference. I typically, and this is something that, as you ask this question, I'm thinking back of all the people that I've talked to about this, and people are like, oh, I don't know, ISO 250 is going to be a problem. I walk around shooting at ISO 400 on the regular, right? And we have these cameras nowadays, these newer bodies that you could walk around at ISO 800 and it still looks clean. So, honestly, like if the trade-off is a stop and a third difference, and you're getting pre-capture, you're getting 120 frames a second, you're getting flash sync up to 1/80,000th of a second, you're getting crop-free 4K 120 video, new ergonomics, all the other stuff that the camera offers, I feel like it's take it, you know what I mean? Like there's some cameras out there that their base ISO is 200 and it's been like that for years and most people don't care. So good question though. Curious, did you also do some video work with A9 III to see if you run into some overheating issues or not? So I have shot some video with the A9 III. I haven't been primarily testing it for video, but to be quite honest with you, I've got at my studio, I've got right now A9 III, A7R5, ZVE, basically the entire ZV line, A7CR, or sorry, yeah, A7CR, Alpha 6700, pretty much most of the newer, Alpha 7IV, which I just recently put up for sale. I have all these cameras and I can't remember. I might have had maybe one time in like all the years that I've shot Sony where I actually had a camera overheat in real working conditions. And the very first time actually that a camera overheated on me, this was like years ago, before they started giving you the option when you set up the camera, it'll say like, forgot what the exact wording is, but you probably know what I'm talking about. When you start up the camera for the first time, it will ask you if you want to turn it on, the high temp feature. That was something that they added, but before they did that, you had to go in there manually and do that. And I had a camera overheat on me. I go back into the menus, I turn on that high temp warning, and then I continued shooting. So I don't know. I just never have any. I've never had any issues in like working conditions, and I'm in Orlando, Florida, which is hot. It's sticky. So I feel like the overheating thing is like, I don't know, like it's old news, but I'm gonna test it out before I return the camera just to be 100% sure. But I haven't had cameras like recent Sony cameras that overheated. So it's a good question. What software are you using to run your studio like 17 hats? I'm not actually using any kind of software. I do stuff old school. To be honest with you, a lot of my professional work, I'm getting maybe 2 to 3 clients a month, and I'm fine with that. That's kind of how I've wanted it. You know, I've kind of shifted a lot of my business, being that I'm in a market that is different here in Orlando. It's not like it was in New Jersey. A lot of the stuff that I do requires me to have to travel for commercial work. There's just not like a big market for that here in Orlando. But I'm quite fortunate that with what I do here on YouTube, that I'm able to really do what I dreamed about doing when I started photography. You know, and I'm sure for many of you, you might feel the same way. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if you can get to the point to where photography doesn't have to be work, right? Like photography could be a passion. It could be something that you enjoy, you know, pursuing, something that you enjoy doing. If you have a creative idea, that you have a space, you know, a safe space to be able to go to and to create those types of images, or at least to try, you know, because it's always going to be a level of work that's involved. But that's kind of how I've gotten to now, you know, over the years with what I've done on YouTube and just all the work that I do in general. I've gotten to the point to where if a client comes through and the numbers don't make sense and the deliverables don't make sense, I am perfectly happy with, hey, let me refer you to somebody else. It's not going to be something for me. And I love it. It's a wonderful thing. Let's see. I'm saying this because there were rumors saying that the A9 III overheats because of the very fast readout speed. Yeah, I'd be interested to I'd be interested to see that. Like I said, I mean, I recorded a YouTube video, shot some B-roll using the camera, and I didn't run into any issues. Shot stuff at 4K 120. You know, I don't know. Like, I'm curious to know if those rumors were people that didn't set the temperature warning in the camera, because I do feel like with many of the Sony cameras, if you don't turn that feature on, it doesn't take very much for it to give you that warning. But yet, if you do turn it on, I mean, it just doesn't overheat. So yeah, I'd be interested to find out. Wendy, how's it going? Hi, Papa Miguel. Cheers from Ohio. Thank you. Yeah, I'm enjoying that dad life. It's very fun. Got 2 little ones at home, one very little one that's about to turn 7 months old, and I've got a 5-year-old that's about to turn 6 next month. So yeah, it's good times. Good time of year too. You know, like experiencing Christmas through the eyes of a kid is just like for those of you who are parents out there, it's like the coolest thing ever. Can't wait to see what action sports panning shots will be like on the A9 III. I mean, so far it's crazy. I have a video actually, and I wish I could. It's going to be on the Alpha Universe channel probably in the next maybe 2 weeks, I'm going to say. But so what I did was I took my son out to a baseball field and took some pictures with him. And it was with a flash. It was just him kind of just hitting a T-ball. And it was crazy, like shooting with a flash, 180 or actually 1/16,000 shutter speed. And he's swinging this bat, and you could actually read all the writing on the bat as it's like being swung. Like as it freezes that shot, you can see his name on the bat. You can see like everything. there is no, when it comes to panning, there's no distortion. Like you're not going to see that rolling shutter effect. It's crazy. It's crazy. From the Villages, how's it going, Keith? Good to have you here. Let's see, Leo, I have pre-ordered the A9 III. I often photograph golfers, and this will be ideal for that. Absolutely. You know, I feel like any type of photography where you're photographing something that's moving, like you're not going to have any kind of wobble. You're not going to have any weird bending of the golf clubs, things like that. It's not going to be a problem. So that's pretty awesome. And it's fast. I mean, at this point, like with pre-capture, you could shoot anywhere like top speed, 60 frames to 120 frames a second. If you miss a shot, it's like, I don't know, like it's much more on the operator now than it is on the camera not being able to keep up. How's the image quality of the 300 GM versus say 400 GM or 135 GM? Good question. So I got the opportunity when the camera was announced. They gave me the Alpha 9 III and the 300 GM to walk around. I was doing a photo walk, took the lens with me, took some portraits with it. The image quality is insane. Like it's it's absolutely insane. And I'm not a 300 millimeter guy, right? Like if you see my content here, I would say the lion's share, the bulk of the video or the bulk of the photos that I take are anywhere from like 70 to 200 millimeters. That's probably why I use that 70 to 200 G Master so much. But the image quality is fantastic. You know, comparing it to the 400 image quality was fantastic. You know, I think it just all depends on what you're shooting. I think it depends on what camera body you're using. The 135 G Master is still in my top 10 like favorite portrait lenses of all time. So yeah, I mean, they're very different focal lengths. I think as far as image quality goes, they're all going to be comparable. So it just depends. It just depends. Let's see. Speaking of portraits, the 85 1.2, sir. Dude, you know, I made a video earlier this year. I think I made the video talking about like the lenses I would like to see this year. And that was one of the lenses that actually was a carryover from the year before. So I made a video in 2022 and I wanted an 85 1.2. Made a video in 2023. I still want an 85 1.2 and it expanded because actually I think there is room for more lenses than just that. I think an 85 1.4 that is, you know, watch that video. You'll see what I'm talking about. But yeah, I don't know anything about an 85 1.2, but I am patiently waiting. Nikon ZF is selling hot, and in general, vintage cameras are trendy among young people. How do you see the chance Sony doing vintage cameras too? You know, that's a super interesting question. In the last year and a half, and I don't consider myself to be a young person. I mean, I don't feel old, you know, I'm in my early 40s. But I don't know if you can see behind me, but this has been my obsession for like the last, I don't know, year and a half, maybe a little more than a year and a half, has been building out my collection. And this is all just two brands. This is Sony and Minolta. And so, you know, I've just been going out there just collecting. I go to thrift stores, go to pawn shops, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun shooting with some of these cameras. So to kind of more directly answer the question, I personally would love to see more vintage cameras across the board. And I would love, you know, here's one thing that I will say. I love the cameras that Sony has been coming out with in the last few years. They're workhorses, right? If I go back and look at some of the designs of camera bodies that Sony has made over the last, we'll say 30 years, I feel like there was a lot of really interesting designs that they made that maybe for their time was maybe it could be considered kind of different. And I feel like, man, if they could do some of these older designs and modernize them, it would be a lot of fun. You know, if they could take some of these older 35 millimeter camera designs and make it more modern and add that modern tech, there's a market of people that would want to buy that. I think the challenge though, and this is one of the things, because you mentioned, and I'm with you 100%. It's trendy among young people, right? Most young people out there are using their smartphones, and their smartphones are good enough in their head. And I think part of the draw to these vintage cameras for them is the fact that you can go to a pawn shop, you can go to old thrift store, and you could buy one of these old cameras for like $10 or $15, right? And it's going to give you it's going to give you a shot that for its time was probably just fine. But nowadays, it might look a little bit funny. But I think that's part of it. It's like people buy these older cameras and it's affordable. If it breaks or you lose it, it's like, oh, well, it's just $10 or $15. I think the challenge with these vintage kind of retro styled cameras is that, they're expensive. We're talking about going from, we'll say less, just for argument's sake, less than $100 for an old vintage camera to now going into the 1,500, 2,000. How much is the ZF? I don't even know. I would guess, I'm just going to guess off the top of my head, like $2,000. So yeah, it's like, if you're trying to appeal to that younger audience, then you can't have a vintage camera that's in that like super high price point, because right now they're buying these old, very inexpensive cameras, and for the most part, they're enjoying it. I think it's the pros like us, that see those designs and we remember using them, or we remember our parents or grandparents using them, and we want to have that, like we want to relive that nostalgia, but we don't want to give up our modern comforts. Like before I got into photography, I used to be really big into cars, right? And a lot of my friends to this day, they're still into cars. And a certain segment of them, certain group of them, they loved older, 60s, 50s, like these old muscle cars and stuff like that. And I always appreciated them because they look beautiful from the outside, but then you get inside and it's like, and you try driving them, they don't have power steering. I'm in Orlando, Florida. Like I said, it's hot and sticky. A lot of these cars don't have air conditioning. You got to roll the windows down on your own. So like I went one time, did a little cruise around with this like old vehicle, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, it's hot. And I'm trying to roll down the window. I'm like, oh man, I got to crank this window down. So I crank it down. And I'm like, oh, it's still hot. Let me open the passenger window. And there's no button. Great. Now I got to reach over, take that one down. It's just all that to say that like we oftentimes appreciate that retro, like that nostalgia. But I think when it comes to people spending their own money, like I wouldn't buy one of those old cars, unless I could somehow retrofit air conditioning into it. As much as I appreciate them. And I feel like with a lot of these retro cameras, they will have a market, but I don't know. I feel like I would like to see how it works out with people, buying these when they're priced on the higher end. Very good question. Let's see. There are already so many great small and lightweight 85 millimeter lenses for Sony. Come on, throw us a bone. Give us an 85 f1.2. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm going to be straight up. If they make it, I will use it. Period. Like I got my, this is my baby right now. This is my 85 f1.8. This is a lens that I use. This was the first shipments that came out, like got my hands on it and it still works. This is when did this thing come out? 2017, 2018? No. Yeah, it's been a while basically. And this lens still works and I still use it for a lot of my professional work and I love the results that I get from it. However, the 51.2, when that came out, I was like over the moon because prior to that 50 millimeter f1.2 lens, I remember that like I had another f1.2 lens from another brand before I switched over to Sony. And as much as I wanted to love that lens, every time I would go out and shoot with it, you would get this like beautiful defocus background at f1.2, which is wonderful. However, I could never get my subjects to be sharp and in focus, and it would drive me bonkers to the point that I had the 85-1.2, a 50-1.2, both of which, for whatever reason, no matter what I did, I could not get the eyes sharp when I would take a portrait of somebody. So I took my camera body, those two lenses, I put them in a box, and I sent it to the manufacturer so that they could micro adjust the lenses to make sure they do whatever test, because I tried to do it on my own and it wasn't working. Sent it to the manufacturer. I waited a week or two. All the stuff came back. They said, hey, everything's been micro adjusted. We should be ready. We should be good to go. I go outside and again, cannot get anything in focus. And it was driving me crazy. I had all these other lenses that were giving me great results. And these two lenses were just very disappointing. So when Sony came out with their 51.2, with the autofocus motors, with everything that they had in it, I honestly had a little bit of PTSD, because I'm like, oh man, my last 51.2 just didn't perform well. I really don't want to have to work hard after, you know, these Sony cameras being so amazing with autofocus. I didn't want to have to work hard to achieve that sharp focus. I didn't want to go backwards to like my old DSLR days. So I took that 51.2 out, and I was blown away by the fact that, oh my gosh, not only am I able to shoot wide open, but now I got eye autofocus. The subject is crazy sharp. The image quality is amazing. And from that second, I was like, okay, 51.2 is back on my radar. I want that lens, and I ended up buying it. And it just immediately got me to thinking, an 85-1.2, man, sign me up. I'll buy it today. I'll buy two today. Do you still need an ND filter with the Alpha 9 III? I guess it depends. Depends on what you're trying to do. If you're shooting video outside and you're shooting, 24 frames a second, shooting wide open with a G Master lens or whatever, and you want to get that kind of cinematic motion, you probably are still going to need an ND filter. But I don't know. I know people that shoot, they don't use ND filters. They shoot wide open and they just crank up their shutter, and then they add that motion blur in post. So it just depends. I don't know. That's probably the only situation that I could see using an ND filter. So Angel, how's it going? The end. Miguel, are you okay? Workshops in Florida. Yes, my friend, I am okay. All is well. Florida workshops are going to be a thing next year. I promise you that. The first one, actually, I'm doing photo walk at WPPI that's coming up in March. I've got a photo walk that weekend, and then I haven't announced it yet, but basically in that week leading up to WPPI, I've got a bunch of stuff happening in that Las Vegas area. So stay tuned for that. And then I've got some other workshops in other areas. But the plan is that I've been redoing my studio here. It's been a mess this year. So the plan is that I want to outfit this place to where I can do like a small group workshop here at my studio. As far as the thumbnail with the end, we're going to get into it. I'm not going anywhere, but the content in 2024 is going to be changing quite a bit, and we'll kind of talk about that. Let's see. For you, what was the most exciting gear announced in 2023, not only from Sony? All these years seem to like run up together. So if I had to go with, I know you're saying not only from Sony, but I'm going to pick Sony to start off with because one just came to mind, and I have a video that I'm working on that's going to go more in depth. But the surprise thing that actually got me excited, not when it was announced, but I was excited to use it. So much so that like I bought it, was the Sony A7C-R. And so, part of that reason is because I use the A7R5 for a lot of my professional work. You know, for a while I was using the Alpha 1, and then A7R5 came out. I used it, fell in love with it, sold my Alpha 1. And, you know, to this day, the A7R5 has just been like my workhorse, right? And of course, with the work I'm doing with Alpha Universe, they'll send me stuff early sometimes to make content for the channel. And they sent me the A7C2 and the A7CR to make videos. And I took them out of the box and I was like, new A7C cameras, woohoo, right? But then I took it to Puerto Rico, used it for a few days, and I was like, okay, all right, I see what they did here. Basically taking a lot of the new kind of latest tech, putting it into this smaller body. They added the dial in the front, which for me was super clutch. They made the grip a little bit better. They added that extension grip, which actually added to the functionality. It made it to the point to where I was actually using the RX1 R2 as like my everyday walk around camera for about a year, even with all the limitations with autofocus and all that stuff. And then when I got the A7CR, I actually got super excited after I came back from Puerto Rico. I was like, okay, this camera's a beast. Like, I'm buying this camera. And sure enough, I have it. It's off on the side somewhere. But bought some lenses for it. I've kind of kitted it out. And that was, for me, by far the most exciting release this year, just because it's the camera that, more so than any other camera that I have here, that's going to be the one that I shoot the most images with, because I take it for family events. You know, it's in my car all the time. So anything that happens, if I run into aliens, UFOs, Sasquatch, chupacabras, whatever, you know, I'm going to take some really high resolution images. But outside of Sony, man, I would have to look at like a multiple choice, because I feel like what's been released this year, like, I don't know what's been released this year that I would be like super hyped about. You know, to be honest, most of what I was most excited about was finding old gems, right? Like, as I've been collecting all these old cameras, I found some really interesting old cameras that are not talked about online. Like, you wouldn't know that they exist. They're very rare cameras. And I think for me, that's been the more exciting thing, has been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I found this camera that there's no YouTube videos about it. There's barely any blog articles or anything about it. Like, the internet is just crickets on some of these older cameras because they came out at a time before the internet, right? So like, that for me has just been by far the most exciting thing. But I don't know, give me a few minutes. I'm going to think about the new stuff that's come out. Backwall is looking fire. Thank you. Yeah, you know, and all of this started with, oh, you know, there's like 6 or 7 cameras that I would love to have, and maybe I could put like a shelf in the background and just have them up there displayed. And one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I've got, I don't know, 100+ cameras back there that span from like the 1930s. You know, I even got to the point, this is coming out in a video as well, I started collecting some old prints, like print magazines, and I'll give you a little sneak preview of a video that I'm working on. This is from what is this, Popular Mechanics? I believe this was from it says 1935. So I'm making a video talking about fast glass, and I think it's going to be very interesting for some people to kind of hear the history of some of these things. Let's see. Any workshops next year? Yep, talked about that. I'll also be at Shutterfest in was that April? So I'll be at Shutterfest. I'll be at WPPI. I've got a few workshops throughout the US, and then I'm planning to do some stuff on YouTube as well. So for those of you who missed it, I'm doing memberships on my channel, and I have a certain tier of membership on my channel to where I'm going to start doing virtual workshops from my studio. And I'll have a model here. We're going to do different setups. I'll have my team here. We'll do these photo shoots. You'll have the opportunity to be able to ask questions, see what images would look like with different lenses, and we can pixel peep images and all that good stuff. So it should be a lot of fun. 80th with a modeling light would be fun to see. Yeah, it would be. I don't know that a modeling light would get it done, but I'd be interested to try it. Let's see. Will the A7S III continue to be built, or is it dead with the announcement of the A9 III? It's going to continue to be built. It's a very popular camera. I don't think the A9 III has anything to do with any of the other camera bodies, as far as like, because this camera came out, some other camera is going to be discontinued or something like that. You know, A7S III is a low light beast. You know, it's a video shooter's dream camera. And I don't think the A9 III threatens any of that. There's still some things that the A7S III has, the A9 III doesn't have. Specifically being able to have that, you know, crazy high ISO, being able to shoot in low light. All of that is big benefits. And that's for a camera that at this point, when did it come out? Like 2020? So yeah, it's an older camera, but it holds up really, really well. When do you think we will see Sony add smartphone touches to their cameras, like the UI, or being able to have apps on the camera itself, like Instagram? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know that that's something that, let me back up. So being somebody who's worked with Sony now for almost a decade, I could tell you that oftentimes the things that I think would be really cool to see, they're already beyond that. Like, they've already thought way beyond that. And so, so I find that there's times where, like, I'll go into an announcement and all of a sudden they'll say, oh, this camera has such and such feature. And I'm like, man, that's really awesome. I didn't even know I needed that, you know? So, I don't know. I mean, there's a possibility, I guess. Anything is possible, but, yeah, I don't know. I mean, and there's also, like, Sony's been doing a lot of stuff with Xperia and really kind of pushing the boundaries of, you know, cameras and smartphones and things of that nature. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like when these Sony cameras first came out, they did have the option to, you know, have different apps, and people didn't use it, you know, and obviously it's different nowadays, but yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Will I be in Louisville for Imaging USA? This is going to be the first year since 2019 that I probably will miss it. There's always a possibility that I'll go, but it's unlikely at this point. Let's see. One question: what is the max shutter for video? Is it 1/8000? So I got the camera here. Let me just show you. So let's see. Put it on base ISO. Yeah. So at f1.8. The max is 1/8000. 1/8000. Let me see if yeah, 1/8000th of a second for video. That's the max. Good question. Let's see. I'm DeBrown. Why you stand me up? You told me to meet you at Colonial Photo and Hobby. You didn't show up. Oh man, dude, I haven't been to Colonial Photo and Hobby. And like, I know they're my local camera store, and I'm big on supporting like small business. I just haven't gone in forever, but that's funny. Let's see. I don't know if I would want apps on my camera. I guess I don't understand what the advantage would be. I mean, I could see what the advantages of having apps on a camera would be, if it was open to developers. Because think about it with your cell phone. Like, if you could only get apps from, I'm an Android guy, right? Let's say you could only get it from Google. You're only going to get Chrome. You're going to get Google Docs, and you're going to only get access to the stuff that they make. But with Android, of course, it's open, so everybody can develop apps on that platform, and you can get things like Candy Crush and all the other games that are available. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some advantages in terms of being able to add functionality to the camera that maybe wasn't thought of or wasn't built by the company. But I think that it's very tricky, right? Because you even see this, especially on the Android side. It's open, so anybody can make apps. And oftentimes those third-party apps is what causes performance problems with the phone. So, and that's why, I mean, I don't know, I'm a phone nerd. I actually came from the mobile communications world before getting into photography. And I remember the thing back then with the early versions of Android, it was a big thing to basically take these phones and strip the OS so that it was just like the most vanilla basic version of Android without any kind of bloatware and things like that. So, I'm sure if they started making apps for the cameras, somebody's going to say, oh, I want to jailbreak the camera so that you can't do that. I don't know. It's a good conversation though. How does the new grip shutter layout feel in your hands? So this, I'm going to say this, ever since the A7R4, the ergonomics got exponentially better for me. Like it got to the point to where I'm able to hold the camera and my pinky doesn't do this, right? Like I actually have to spread my fingers out in order to get my pinky to go here. This grip is chunky, like it feels good. They did a really good job. And I think part of it is like, okay, with the old school DSLRs, there was a lot of real estate for you to hold on to the camera. I feel like this is the best iteration of camera grip that Sony has made up to date. The other thing I really like, which may not even seem like a big deal, let me see if you can see it, but they kind of raised the shutter button. So it used to be that it was almost in line with these custom buttons, but now it's raised up just the tiniest bit. And so when you are holding the camera like this, like it's just really easy to hold. I know they're supposed to have like a vertical battery grip, which I would say prior to the A7R4, every single Sony camera that I ever owned, I had to buy the grip, mainly because I shoot a lot of vertical photos, but also because I didn't like holding the camera and having my pinky just dangle. This is by far the best ergonomics of any of the Sony cameras. And like I said, the A7R4, I feel like was near perfect, and this just got even better. So it feels really, really good. And I know you talked about this actually in your last video. One of the things that you wanted to see was to see the bigger cameras. I don't know if this is the case for you, but I know that a lot of people want that because of the fact that maybe they used an old A7R2, even A7 III, where they had that problem where they would hold the camera and their pinkies were here. And if you're shooting for hours, that could bother you. That could bother some people. Or if you have really big hands, that could bother some people. Like I said, this camera, I think it alleviates the need, and it strikes that like really nice sweet spot to where you still have a small compact camera, but you have a grip that's big enough to where you can hold it, and I don't know, like it just works. So I would love to see this design of grip continue throughout the rest of the upcoming bodies. And I would rather see this grip more than I would like to see like an actual bigger, like, and I loved the A99 II. I don't know if many of you knew this, but at the time it was A7R2 and A99 II were both on the market at the same time. And I would main, like that A99 II was my main camera. Like it was, I loved it. But now I feel like they've just struck this like great balance with the grip on this camera that I don't know, like, I don't know that it's so necessary to have like a bigger camera unless it's going to give me like 2 times the features, right? Like if you're going to give me like crazy features that you just can't design because the camera body is too small, then fine, give me a bigger camera. But like in the case of the A99 II, when that came out at the same time as A7R2, it was basically the same camera. Obviously, the tech was different because it was that translucent mirror. But it was basically the same camera and a bigger body. And I don't know that that's like I don't know that I would spend the money for that. I did it back then because the tech wasn't the way it is today. But like, let's say if they had an A99 III that was just a bigger version, A mount of the A7R5, I wouldn't buy it because like the glass just got so good. Like we're in a good place these days. That is bad in combination with ISO 250 as minimum, so we always need ND outside. Yes, talked about that a little bit earlier. That's how I would do it. Do you ever think Sony will update 100 to 400 with a faster f-stop or smaller weight, since they did the 300 small and light, and newer 70 to 200 GM is smaller and lighter? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it seems like this is a story that I think that hasn't been told that much. Sony has been killing it with their lenses. But I don't know if y'all understand, and maybe I have a different perspective because even though I have the lenses that I own, I get the opportunity with what I do for Alpha Universe. I get a lot of these lenses early, get to test them, make the videos for the channel. And I would say in the last like 2.5 years, like pretty much since COVID started, man, the lenses that they've been coming out with have been unbelievable. To the point that like, you know, I have a video coming out soon, and this lens probably is very familiar to a lot of the Sony shooters, the 55 f1.8. And I remember how amazing this lens was and how sharp and like just all the praise that this lens got. And now I'm like, there are lenses that are so much better today. Like not even close. Like it's not even it's not even close. Like some of these lenses, the 51.4, amazing image quality. Basically that whole trio of the 24, 35, and 50 G Master f1.4s are amazing. Even their G series, like the 50 2.5 little tiny lens, fantastic. Yeah, they're killing it with what they're doing with these smaller lenses, and I wouldn't be surprised. I would love to see it. Let's see. I'm really enjoying Sony A7 IV, but I'm disappointed that Sony only made the top memory card slot compatible with CF Express cards. I like shooting with no to low compression codecs. Your thoughts? Yeah, you know, I think that when it comes to like some of these camera bodies, you know, there's always going to be compromise, right? When you're used to having Sony cameras that have 2 CF Express Type A slots, and then they offer one where it's only one slot has it, yeah, I mean, that could be disappointing for some. But I don't know. I mean, I've got the A7 IV, and I personally have never even thought about the cards being an issue, but I can imagine for some people it could be. Yeah. I mean, A7 IV is not my main camera body either. So like I might be the wrong guy to ask on that. Like I'm an A7R5 guy. So you know, to me, A7 IV is like a great entry level full frame camera, like amazing features for its price point. But you know, for me now, like I do this professionally, I could afford to do A7R5, and so I just kind of go with that. And Wendy was saying you can use 2 SDs on A7 IV. That's correct. You just can only use one CF Express Type A. So let's see. Showing love to Andrea. Yes, indeed. Let's see. Certain codecs require CF Express. Okay, yeah, that's true. So yeah, I mean, depending on what you're trying to do, if you're shooting video and you're using an SD card, there's going to be certain settings you cannot use with an SD card because it's not fast enough. But yeah, that's one of those things where it's like if you need to use those codecs, you got to buy those cards. Let's see. I'm a hybrid photo video shooter, and the lag between switching and waiting for writing data annoys me, even on the A1. Can you tell if this camera got faster in that regard? Hybrid, the lag between switching and waiting for writing data. Are you talking? So maybe you might want to follow up on this question. So do you mean that you're in the middle of shooting stills and then you're switching to video and there's a lag? I'm not sure that I quite understand the question. Could be that I haven't had enough coffee today. But generally speaking, everything about this camera got faster. Like menus got faster, everything got faster. But yeah, see, let me know, because I'd like to return or get back to that question. Do you already have final firmware on the A9 III? I will have it shortly. Yes. Yes. Dan, A99 II had the coolest flip screen too. Love the ergonomics on that. Dude, I could not agree more. Like that screen to me, there were times where I had conversations with some of the folks who could impact things at Sony. And, you know, back when they were just doing like the tilt screen, I was like, man, it would be so cool if you just literally just took the screen from the A99 II and just put it on these bodies. And I don't know what the holdup was, what the problem was, but I really loved the flip screen for its time. And honestly, like I love the flip screen on this camera and the A7R5. They're also really good too. But I do agree, it could do some really cool stuff. Wish there was a lens with a rotating mount shorter than a 70-200. Rotating mount. What do you mean by that? Like what kind of lens? Like, are you talking like a 24-70? I mean, to me, the 70-200 G Master version 2 is it's a monster. Like I love that lens. There's not really, and I mean, I would always take a lighter lens, but it's already so light. Like it's for what it is and for what we have right now, like that lens is a beast. I mean, I shot some photo and then need to switch to video. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. So I don't know if you could see that, but let's go. I'm in high plus right now. Apparently my memory card is full. So hold on. Let's see. These are all my tests with the camera. Let's get rid of. Let's see if I can find a memory card that doesn't have stuff on it. And we'll test that out. Okay. Well, this one gives me 22 photos. I got a lot of stuff. I need to start clearing these cards. All right. So there's a few photos. Switch it to video and hit record. And no space on the slot, of course. But if there wasn't, if I had a memory card here, I would test that. But I don't want to delete anything off of these because I got to make sure that it's clear. But just now, I mean, it was able to switch over pretty quickly. So I don't think that'll be a problem. Have to wait for all the photos are written, even on FastCF Express, until I could start video recording on weddings and events. This can be deciding moments. Yeah, the buffer clears very quickly when you're shooting at high speeds on the A9 III. I don't see that being a problem. Or let me clarify that. I don't see it as being as much of a problem as it was with some older cameras, being that this thing is like crazy fast. Let's see, Keith Franklin, is there any update on the Sony A1 firmware? It's been a minute. I haven't heard anything on the firmware front. I'm assuming that, I mean, they just talked about that during the announcement. Here's something, and this is something I was going to talk about as well. I'm glad you're bringing this up. Um, let me know in the comments specifically with the A1, what would you like to see in the firmware update? Because it's interesting. Like I obviously, I mean, I'm online. I hear the comments and read the blogs and rumor sites and all that good stuff. And I want to say it was Philip Bloom, I think, who kind of brought up the whole firmware conversation. And then I know Gerald brought it up as well. And then it just kind of took off and became this thing. Um, I would love to know what features you would like to see in a firmware update, because I think for example, like I know focus breathing compensation is something that I have it on some of my camera bodies and I don't use it. Like there isn't a feature that isn't directly attributed to a piece of hardware, right? So like with Alpha 9, you've got the AI processor that's dedicated. You've got it on the A7C series, the new ones, A7R5. So because you have this dedicated AI processor, that allows the camera to have these other features. And I know some people are like, oh, I want to have these features, but like they're AI features and the camera doesn't have that AI processor. So, there's certain things in firmware that I don't think would make their way there. But I will say this, like, I don't know, for trying to be very delicate how I say this. I think that things like focus breathing compensation, I think when you have it, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I got it. And you're just going to continue using the camera the way that you've been using it. A lot of the times when it comes to focus breathing, like we've had that for forever, right? Like focus breathing has been a thing on the camera, like consumer side for a very long time. And people didn't even think about it until people started bringing it up. Maybe it's something that could be added via firmware, but to be honest with you, I don't see that impacting the average everyday user very much. But that's just me. I mean, that's just my personal take. But I would love to hear what features. How good is video tracking on the A9 III with the new AI and the fast speed? I know for photos it looks great, but won't sure how it would be for video. It's going to be fantastic for video. I used it very briefly. I haven't been shooting a lot of video because again, I'm trying to do flash because that's my wheelhouse. But from what I've seen specifically with tracking performance in video, I've tracked my dogs running around. I've tracked my son running around like a crazy person. And it works just as well as any of the other AI-based autofocus cameras. So, it's just going to matter on what lenses you use with it. But yeah, it's going to be great. All right, so here we go. Dan was saying A1 vertical frame guides, focus breathing comp. Yeah, I mean, like I said, so on the focus breathing comp, we kind of talked about that. I don't know that that's that big of a deal. Maybe that could be added via firmware, but personally, I feel like that would not appease the people that are complaining about the firmware stuff. Vertical frame guides. How do you use that? Are you talking about like the rule of thirds grids and stuff like that? In times of Instagram and TikTok, we need open format video option, readout full sensor. This isn't just software needed. Yeah. Maybe in terms of the software thing. Yeah, maybe. I personally, I was very surprised when I realized, like the day that I realized that it wasn't recording the whole sensor. I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. But again, it's never stopped me from being able to shoot the things I need to shoot. So yeah, I mean, it would be great. I feel like it would be cool to be able to shoot a horizontal video and then pull a vertical video out that still looks good. I'll take that. But would it stop me from doing what I need to do today? Probably not. But any way they can make it easier for me, I'm all for it. If you have the choice of having the Sony a7 IV plus Sony a7S III, or only having the Sony a7R5, which option would you choose? I'd already had the a7S III, which is why I got the a7 IV. If you had the choice of having Sony a7 IV plus a7S III, I personally wouldn't even choose those. So given the question, I would only have a7R5 because I feel like it's one of the best hybrid cameras that's out there. Like, you're getting super high resolution stills. For video, it does most everything that I would want it to do. You could even shoot 8K video, which is nuts. So for me, as a hybrid shooter, somebody who shoots content for YouTube and also shoots stills, I would pick a7R5. But you would need a second body. So like in that scenario, I would probably end up doing FX3 and a7R5 if I was going to choose two bodies to do like everything. Those would be the two bodies that I would choose, and they are the two bodies that I have. So and I'll even give an honorable mention if you're on the budget side of things. Right now, this video that you're looking at right now is being shot on the FX30. That's actually the camera that I use. Anytime you see this set when I make a YouTube video, that's FX30 every single time. Until I change up this set, maybe I'll use a different camera. But yeah, that's FX30, and it works really well. But FX3, when I go out and shoot, that's like my video camera. And I also have FX9 and FX6, but I rarely use the FX6 these days. The FX9 I use quite a bit. If I want something to look really good, like my B-roll, if I want it to be super detailed, super sharp, I shoot FX9 for my product B-roll with the 90 macro, and the stuff looks crazy. Let's see. So when I'm shooting horizontal video, but need to ensure my framing could also be used for vertical, a7 IV and a7C2 have it. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess in that scenario, that would be pretty slick. Yeah, I mean, I don't see why that couldn't be done. I think on the cameras that are more kind of like video centric, that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that. Do you think Nikon Z9 is going up against the A9 III as its closest competitor? I don't think so. I don't think so. You know, here's the thing, and this is something that I hope that people expand the way that they think about these camera comparisons, because these cameras are not like these old cameras that are behind me, where many of them have a lens that's fixed to it. So when you buy that camera body, that's the lens that you have, and it's for better or worse till death do you part. When I look at a camera body and when I recommend camera bodies to people, I'm not just looking at the camera body itself. I'm not looking at just the specs. There could be a hypothetical camera from some other brand, not speaking to this Z9 specifically, but just generally speaking, there could be a camera out there that has specs that just completely blow away whatever it is that is being offered by another camera. You have to look at the ecosystem, right? You have to look at everything that is involved. Like if you spend $5,000 or $6,000 on a camera body, and all you're doing is looking at that camera and saying, oh, I love these features. I love that it's got 8K. I love that it's got, you know, whatever the frame rate is that it has. And then you buy that camera body. The reality is going to set in after maybe a year, 2 years, as you grow with that system, that some of the lenses that you would like to use, maybe your friend might have a Sony camera and then they're using a different lens. And you're like, oh, I would like to have a lens like that. And then you realize that they don't have it. And then you realize that the third-party options aren't that great. So when I look at camera bodies, I'm looking at it through the lens of what's the ecosystem around this camera body? Because you could have this amazing camera, and if there aren't lenses out there that are interesting, if there aren't lenses out there, and I'm not talking about just one, I'm saying like a whole suite, right? Then it's not going to be a camera that I would really consider, that I would really consider going for. So, as far as how it goes up against the A9 III, if we're talking spec for spec, I don't know, because I don't know all the specs on the Z9, but what I do know is that if you're looking at the ecosystem, you buy this camera, even if they're the same price, you have way more options available to you in terms of third-party accessories, in terms of lenses, just in terms of support in general. You have way more. And I'm talking like way more. There's literally hundreds of different lenses available for Sony that are not available for the Nikon mount, that are not available for Canon RF. So, it just makes it one of those really tough propositions, and I'm not trying to like talk negatively about other brands, but it's just the reality of the situation. Like, you buy a Z9, like, do they have f1.4 lenses for, 35s, 50s, 24s, 85s? Do they have, I know they have f1.2 lenses. How do they perform? What does the third-party ecosystem look like? I know for sure, because I did the research, there's 40, last I checked, it was like 44 different brands that make lenses for Sony. So any kind of crazy lens you can think of, fish eyes, telephotos, macros, wide angles, tilt shifts, special effects lenses, like there's so many different options for Sony. And I'm not trying to like turn this into a rah-rah session, but you have to think outside of like, okay, camera A versus camera B, because even if camera A, which is a competitor, has better specs on paper, when you compare it to the options that are available with something like the A9 III, that's where it's like, man, it makes it harder for me to part with $6,000, for example, when I'm just buying a camera for the camera itself, and I can't put the kind of glass on it that I would want to actually use it on a day-to-day basis. So, long answer, sorry. But I get hyped up about those things. Leo, good to have you on the stream. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Is there any decent tilt shift lens for E-mount? I have not shot a tilt shift lens since back in my old DSLR days. Maybe some folks can comment on that, but I'm not sure, because I don't shoot with tilt shifts very often. So now that we're kind of deep into the live stream, while I'm waiting, any other questions you have, by the way, let me know. Got the A9 III here next to me. Talking about the future of this channel. So you might notice over the last like 2 months, I've been releasing a lot more content. Part of that has been very intentional, because I feel like I went through a phase where, I'm pushing out content for the Alpha Universe channel, and it just leaves little time for me to release content on this channel. And I have a lot of ideas for videos, a lot of different concepts. And to be honest with you, I probably have like 7 or 8 videos that are already filmed that I just haven't had the time to sit down and just compile and edit. So hopefully that time will present itself. But moving into 2024, one of the big things that I'm doing, and one of the reasons why I've been collecting a lot of these old cameras, is that I want to make more content that is outside the realms of like just the new stuff, right? On this YouTube channel, if there's something new and noteworthy and I get the opportunity to use it, I will use it. And it's not to try to sell you something, all right? Now, I know most of you all know me, like you've been on this channel for a while, you know the type of content that I make. I try to be very helpful with the stuff I make. There's people out there who are like, oh, you're just talking about it because it's the new latest greatest thing, and that's not the case. I'm trying to put content out there for those people that might be interested in that thing and maybe have questions about it. Here's my contribution to that conversation. That's the way I look at those videos. Specifically like the latest flash videos with the Alpha 9 III. That's why I made those videos. It was only to add to the conversation for those people who are interested in this camera. It's not made to try to tell you that, oh, if you have an A7 IV, you need to sell that right away and come buy this camera. It's not for that, right? Nothing to do with it. It has to do with, if you were interested in this camera and you have questions, here are some answers. No more, no less. But what I would like to do, and I kind of played around with it here on my channel, and I'm starting to notice that unfortunately with the YouTube algorithm and the way YouTube works, if I release certain types of content on my channel, they're not going to do well. And that sometimes is counterproductive to what I'm trying to do here on the channel. So I actually started a second channel, which I'm going to share more about in the upcoming weeks as I get the content ready for it. I'm trying to get like 3 or 4 videos like in the can that are ready to go, and then that way I can announce it. But the gist of it is going to be that all these cameras that you see behind me, I'm going outside, I'm shooting with it, and I'm showing you the results. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So for those of you who are interested in, vintage cameras, classic cameras, and seeing what those cameras, what the history is behind some of these cameras and what the results would be in my hands specifically, that's something that's coming up in the new year. The other thing too is that, I'm trying to put out more content on this channel in general. And I understand that there's going to be some topics that maybe resonate with some people and not resonate with others. And that's just the way it's going to have to be. Like I made a video recently talking about YouTube reviews, and I literally have been sitting on that topic for at least 2 or 3 years. And I didn't make the video mainly because I said to myself, if I make this video, and because it's so different from what I usually make, no one's going to watch this video. So what's the point, right? And as time has gone on, I'm like, you know what? I don't even care at this point if people watch it. Like, I'm still going to get out there and I'm still going to say my piece. Maybe at some other point, it's just there as reference so that if someone brings up something, I can say, hey, watch this video. This is how I feel about whatever topic. But yeah, videos like that were something that I normally would not make. And I feel like, you know what? I'm just going to make the kind of videos that I want to make on this YouTube channel. Sometimes it might be me shooting. Sometimes it might be, doing like hands-on type videos with different products. I get the opportunity to test out a lot of stuff. I will not be making reviews on this channel. I know a lot of people will comment and be like, hey, when's your review on fill in the blank coming out? It's not coming out. I don't want to do reviews on this channel. I feel like reviews to me are a very difficult thing to do. And only because there's just a lot of bias involved. And even when someone tells you they're not biased, they're biased. And, it's not to say that it's not valuable, but I feel like, I don't know, if you want to know what I use and you want to hear like my perspective on something, then I can make those videos. But as far as doing like a general review of stuff, not planning to do anything like that. And of course the memberships, which we talked about. So doing the live streams, that's something I'm going to be doing. Making some smaller videos on topics that I think would be very useful. Those things are going to be part of the YouTube memberships. So let's see. I think Sony FX30s are also one of the best studio cameras out there. If there wasn't a crop on 4K 60 and the second native ISO base was a lot higher, I think it would be the perfect camera. Yeah. Keep this in mind for its price point. The freaking camera's a beast. I mean, I don't even know how else to put it. So prior to me having FX3 and FX30, and of course the FX9, I used to shoot most of my YouTube content with the FS5 and the FS7 Mark II, and the video quality looked amazing. And I remember back then you would spend like 5 or 6 grand for an FS5, and then you had to buy a license to be able to shoot 120 frames a second. You're getting like crazy image quality for less than 2 grand. You get autofocus, which those cameras didn't have very good autofocus. You're getting amazing autofocus in the FX30 under $2,000. You're getting a lot of the functionality, which actually made the FS5 very interesting to me, like having the XLR inputs. You're getting that with the FX30 under $2,000. It's an impressive camera. And I would even say, taking it a step even further, the Alpha 6700 for $1399 blows away what I was getting for my FS5 that was $6,000 back in 2015, 2016. So we have it really good right now. Like I try to tell creators this all the time. Like the gear that we have right now is so good. And yeah, there's going to be compromises. You might have a crop here and there on certain camera bodies, but the reality is like what we have now for the prices that we have them blow away what we had in the last like 5 or 6 years. Yeah, I mean, man, FX30 is a really good camera, as is the FX3. Let's see. Yeah, I would like some lenses with old analog flares and character, but also with the modern autofocus. Would be nice if manufacturers not only focus on sharpness and clinically dead look like machines. Given the, well, let me back up. I agree with you, but there's always a but. But the thing is, think about the current climate that we have with YouTube, with influencer culture, with photography blogs. If a company comes out with a lens that has a lot of that old analog flair to it, that isn't technically perfect, but gives you something that looks interesting, do you imagine what the videos would say? Could you imagine what the clickbait articles would be? You'd hear, oh yeah, they made this thing and it sucks. It's chromatic aberration is bad. It's got distortion. It's got this, like all the things that we would want in that type of characteristic of a lens would be talked about in the most negative fashion. They would say, oh, it's not technically perfect. It's not this, it's not that. And I will put a lens that I'm making a video about here shortly as a follow-up. Sony 100mm f2.8 G Master, the STF lens. That lens is everything that you're talking about. It is a lens that has amazing character. And I don't know for sure, but I would venture to guess that for every one of those lenses that's sold, they probably sell 100 of the 70-200s, or 100 of the 135 G Master, or 100 of the 85 1.4s. It's all about how these lenses can be marketed, not just to like the diehards, but how they can be marketed to a mass market. And I think that's where the challenge comes in. It takes so much time, so much money, so many resources for, these companies to make these kinds of lenses, that I think it sucks that when they do step out and make a lens that has these characteristics, everybody dunks on them for all the reasons that like we want in a lens. So, man, it almost goes back to the whole like retro camera idea. Like it's very tough. We want that, but it's going to get dunked on. And I think that for a lot of people who maybe have that desire to have that kind of a product, I don't know, by the time they finish hearing all the negativity about it online. They'll be like, oh, maybe it's not the camera or it's not the lens that I want. But I would love to see it. I'm down for it. Sony FX30's second native higher ISO base doesn't really seem to be all that great, almost as if it's false advertisement from Sony. I mean, I've never used the high ISO on the FX30 and felt like it didn't look good. So I don't know what you're comparing it to, but I've used the base ISO. I've used pretty much even non-native, and it still looks fine. So it would have to really break up for me to kind of like feel like, oh, it wasn't that good. I agree with you. Price-wise, you can't beat the FX30. That's what I'm saying. And I would even say more so the Alpha 6700, because you have a lot of the same things. You've got, you know, the sensor, you've got the recording options. Granted, the body is different, but you have AI, autofocus, and all the stuff that comes with that. So, yeah, I agree. Analog look is probably best left to software solutions. Yeah, I mean, that's also the part of it too. Like anytime I've ever wanted to get that analog look, I use programs like Exposure, Exposure X7, and they have all of the different film emulations, and it's literally just boop, one click, and there it is. All the perfection is gone if I want it to be gone, or I could still integrate the elements of these older film stocks while still retaining some of that sharpness and that detail. So, very good point. Change of thought. Have you used the Laowa 12 millimeter f2.8? What a beast of a lens, especially for real estate. The one that I only own one Laowa lens, and I think it's the 15 millimeter, the zero distortion lens. And I'm very spoiled with autofocus, especially with some of the, you know, newer lenses. You know, 35 G Master autofocus is crazy. So I'm really spoiled with autofocus. For me to go back to manual, I got to be using an old camera to get into that like headspace. So I haven't used it yet, and I probably wouldn't buy it only because if it doesn't have autofocus, it's probably not for me. I just don't want to have to work that hard to get a good image, you know? Like there's a part of this, there's a part of photography, and I feel like it was very much the case back in the day with analog, where like people wanted to work hard to get an image, and there was a sense of pride of like, you would show someone an image, and it was like, oh man, if you only knew what it took for me to get this shot. I had to climb the highest mountain peaks in the world to get this shot, and you know, it was negative 100 degrees outside, and I got frostbite in the, you know, the tip of my pinky, and I was able to get this shot. And you know, there's a part of that, right? There's also another side of it, which is the side that I've been enjoying for the last few years, where it's like, okay, creatively, I have an idea, and I go in, and I get what I want, and I get out, and I enjoy the rest of my life. And so I feel like that's what a lot of the lenses offer today. And it's hard for me to go back unless I'm using one of these old cameras where that's just like, it's putting me in a different headspace where it's like, okay, this is the best of what was available in 1968, for example. And you just kind of make do with whatever was available. Let's see. I got disappointed with the low light performance of FX30, had to return for A7S III. Have you used FX30 for run and gun situation like weddings? I have not used it for run and gun situations. I use it almost exclusively for studio. And in that environment, it works great. I have used it for like just filming stuff around the house. But yeah, I mean, you know, you're talking about A7S III is like an absolute beast when it comes to just video in general. So yeah, I mean, if I was doing a wedding, if I'm doing any kind of professional work, I'm shooting full frame. I'm not shooting APS-C. But on the flip side of that, if you don't have the budget for A7S III and you're just getting started, I would say go with the A6700 and start shooting video with that, make some money. And as soon as you have the money, buy full frame, buy A7S III, buy an FX3, ZVE1, FX6, FX9, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, buy the things that you could make money with. Do you think Sony will ever go into CF Express Type B? Maybe. I mean, I didn't think they would go into making a whole new card, you know, with CF Express Type A, and they did it. So they make the cards as well. So I don't know. Maybe it's possible. TW, good to see you from Germany. Are you the same TW that comments on Alpha Rumors? I'm sure you are, but welcome. Yeah, speaking of Alpha Rumors, earlier today, my 2 latest videos on the Alpha 9 III were posted. And so definitely check those out if you haven't seen it. Let's see, waiting for A9 III, shipping here in Germany is end of January. You know, that always kills me that you guys in Europe get these cameras before we do. I think ours is February 22nd. So we're pretty late into February before it starts shipping out here in the States. But that's awesome. You're going to love it when you get it. Let's see. I usually only use autofocus lenses too, but for real estate, the Laowa 12mm gives me that wide angle and zero distortion for less than half the price of a comparable wide angle Sony lens. Yeah, you know, I think when it comes to real estate photography, it is quite possible that if you have the time to sit there and get your shots like perfectly dialed in and just get them perfectly done, manual focus could be fine. I think for anything outside of that realm, like portraiture, for example, man, manual focus is a tough proposition. Lightroom or Capture One? I don't know that it's a one or the other. I use Capture One almost exclusively for tethering in my studio. And I would say 90% of the time when I'm retouching my portraits, I'm using Capture One. There's still sometimes when I go into Lightroom, but it's very, very rare. I could tell you like these days, it's because I have the A9 III and they have support for the files and Capture One doesn't. But until Capture One has that support, then I just end up going back. So yeah, but I would say Capture One right now. Let's see, Francisco, how's it going? I've got a question. For the longest time when using a camera in crop mode, A7 III, besides changes in the length and aperture values, do background compression change as well? So my initial answer to that without thinking it through would be yes, it does change. But if you compare the compression like side by side, I don't think it's not gonna look different. So in other words, if you're in crop mode on an A7 III, and let's say you had a crop sensor camera and you're taking that same shot at the same focal length, I think the compression is gonna look basically the same. Hope that answers the question. Testing in Voto since a few days. It's amazing. Yeah. You know, it's so funny. Voto, I get emails every single day as a YouTuber, as a content creator, being in the space that I'm in. And I'm sure every other YouTube content creator that you watch is going through the same things. We get emails every single day from companies that are like, hey, come look at our product. Hey, could you review our product? And Evoto was a company, they reached out, I want to say it might have even been late last year. I mean, it's been a while. They reached out And they were one of many AI companies that would email me and they would say, oh, could you test out our stuff and could you review it? And most of the time, because I was getting so many requests, I don't even open the emails. And just one day, like they were very kind, very persistent. Finally, I opened the email and I was like, let me see what this Evoto thing is all about. And this was, I want to say January of this year. And I tried it out and I was like, holy cow, this is crazy. And I've used a lot of different programs. And so I started using it on my images. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try it out on my images over the course of the next few months and I'll get back to you. So I was using it on a lot of my photos. And where it really, and I think I said it in my video, but if I didn't, I'm going to say it here. Where it really shines is that the way that I've been able to get better at photography over the course of the last decade was that I would do photo shoots all the time, right? And I would do them paid, I would do them unpaid, I would do test shoots. And what ends up happening is when you do a test shoot with a model, for example, let's say they spent 2 hours with you at the studio or 2 hours with you outside, you have to give them photos for their time, even if it's a test and they're not your best work ever, but you got to give them something for their time, right? What I was doing for years was every single test shoot that I would do, I would actually outsource the retouching almost 90% of the time. I would outsource the retouching to a retoucher because I didn't want to spend the time to edit the photos. I knew I had to deliver something to them, but I also know that my retouching process could take an hour per photo, 2 hours per photo, depending on what kind of image we were testing for. I got better things to do with my time, right? If I got to deliver 5 to 8 or 10 photos, 12 photos, however many from a shoot, I don't want to spend a day retouching those images. I don't want to spend any amount of time retouching those images, especially if it was a test shoot where I'm just trying to like test out something for my lights or a new shooting technique or whatever it might be. But again, I know I have to give them images, right? So where Evoto came in clutch was that I would run these, I would go through, pick my selects just like I always do. And instead of sending them out to the retoucher, I just ran them through Evoto. And I would look to see, how do these look? And I would deliver the photos to whoever it was that I photographed, and they loved it, right? So it was like, okay, if I have something that's going in my portfolio, I'm going to spend the time to retouch it. I'm going to do the hard work, right? But if I'm just doing a test shoot, to outsource it to a good retoucher, it could be anywhere from like $25 to $40 per image. And that's what a lot of the models that I've worked with over the years, they don't understand that. There's a cost involved in shooting, right? So they give me their time, and obviously there's a cost involved. There's a trade there. There's my time and skill and talent. There's value there. But after the fact, when they say, oh, how many images am I getting from the test shoot? And I say, oh, well, you're getting 5 images. Like, oh, I'm only getting 5 photos. And it's like, well, 5 photos at a bare minimum is going to end up costing $100 to get retouched, right? So what's great with Evoto is each edit was like less than 10 cents. So I could go through 5 photos within 30 minutes, maybe even faster sometimes, and get like a really high quality result. And that's where, for me, Evoto has been awesome, and I would tell you all, watch my video. It was one of the more recent videos that I released about retouching. There's a link there, and I think they give you like 30 free credits. But if you haven't tried it out, definitely try it out. Like, it's really, really, really good. Can you print packages like 5x7 and 4 wallets for location? I'm pretty sure that there are printers out there that do that. Whether or not they look good or not is probably a whole different conversation. I know that I think HP made it. They had like printer that would do like wallet size photos, but the quality was just trash. And then I had like a Canon printer that does like 4x6s that looked better than what I was getting from the HP, but it didn't do 5x7. It did 4x6. So yeah, if you're looking for something portable that you can use that's like battery powered, I don't think there is anything for 5x7s. And I know for the wallet stuff, I haven't found anything that looks good. Yeah, I'm not sure. Hopefully I'm answering that question. So Gabe, how's it going? Good to see you out there. I process my files in Capture One, export high quality JPEGs, and import them into Lightroom Cloud. So they are now on every device and backed up into the cloud. Yeah, I mean, that is kind of cool. I was using their cloud service for a little while. I've actually switched over. So I have a Synology setup, which basically I do the same thing. Like I have them all backed up to my Synology drive, and then I just access them off my drive, and everything is backed up locally and also on that NAS. So it works very similar, and I could actually just buy a hard drive, and I think one of my drives, it has 8 bays, and half of it is like 18 terabyte, and then the other half is 22 terabyte drives. So I have a lot of storage space. So I just use everything with Synology. Thanks for sharing all the great content on your channel. My pleasure. Thanks for watching them. Then they automatically flow into Lightroom Classic, where I can manually add keywords, create smart collections, utilize published services, etc. Yeah, that is one thing that I do like within Lightroom, being able to add those keywords. I wasn't using Lightroom like that historically. I actually used to create a separate catalog for every single photo shoot. And only because the performance on some of these old computers, when you have just a massive catalog with like every photo shoot you've ever done, while it in theory seems great that I can quickly pull up any photo, in reality, the computers that I had at the time, and they were pretty beefy, they would just always just struggle to pull up any photos. So yeah. But yeah, I use the Synology NAS devices, and it works really well. So again, any questions that you all have, let me know. Happy to answer them in the comments. One of the things that I was going to say too, anybody out there do any kind of like cubing, like work with Rubik's cubes and know how to solve them? You know, it's kind of funny, and I'll share a little story because there's a small group of us here today. But over the years, as you kind of like get older and you age, you feel like sometimes your brain doesn't fire at the same speed as it used to when you were young. And so I've been trying to do some things to try to like keep my brain sharp beyond just like the creative stuff, because obviously like you hear about creator burnout all the time, and I don't want my brain to ever burn out. I always want to be, sharp and have the ability to think on my feet when it comes to just anything. And so these Rubik's cubes have been like my guilty pleasure over the last I think I started in February of this year, just learning how to solve the Rubik's Cube. And it's been a lot of fun. And I actually have a presentation that I'm doing in a few months, actually, talking about the fact that basically learning how to solve this Rubik's Cube and learning how to take good photos is very, very, very similar, like surprisingly similar. And so, yeah, I don't know if anybody else out there, does like speed cubing and knows how to like solve these things. And I would love to hear if you agree with that. But when you learn the algorithms of how this works, I feel like there's algorithms involved in photography that if you follow them, you will always get a good photo. Just like if you follow those algorithms with the Rubik's Cube, it doesn't matter how it's configured, you could always solve it. And I feel like that's going to be a really interesting, I don't know, it'll be a really interesting topic once I get it all put together. Let's see. Can you print packages or location using cap? Oh, okay. Can you do it in Capture One? I don't know because I don't print stuff through Capture One. I send everything out to get printed, so I do not know. 21st century fidget. Yeah. You know, I imagine back in those days before like the advent of YouTube where people could actually learn how to solve these things, it pretty much was just like a really fancy fidget spinner. And it's so funny because like I have a 7-month-old daughter, and she has all these cool toys, and every single time I take the Rubik's Cube out, she is mesmerized just watching me do this, like just scramble the cube. She's like amazed by it. It's so funny to me. My son can solve in like 30 seconds. He's all into it. Dude, my fastest time right now, I think is 34 seconds or 35 seconds. And it was totally by luck. You know, there's a certain number. I want to say it's like 7 or 8 algorithms. I'm sure your son knows them. There's like 7 or 8 algorithms that you have to do to solve it. And the one day, just the way that it was scrambled, instead of it being 8, it was like 5, and it was solved. And I was like, holy cow, I can't believe it. And it took like 34 seconds. If he could do less than 30 seconds consistently, dude, I'm jealous. Like my brain does not fire that fast. I still have to look at it and think like, okay, where am I going with this? But I think I've been kind of timing myself just so that I have a base level. And I think right now my average is right around like 50 seconds or so. Took me a while just to get it to where I can solve it under a minute. And now there's one step in this process that seems to always take me a long time. And when I say a long time, it takes me like 10 seconds, but feels like a long time. But yeah, let me know. Ask your son what method he uses to solve it in 30 seconds. Ask him if he's using CFOP. What are your favorite lenses Sony should release next in 2024? So I made a video about this a few months ago. And what's funny is a lot of the lenses that I talked about in that video, completely by dumb luck, actually ended up getting announced. Some of them did not. So the carryovers from that video, 85 1.2, I would love. I would love to see an 85 1.4 that is the size of the 35 1.4. That would be a dream. Even if it was a little bit bigger, I could dig that. But how awesome would that be to have a 24, 35, 50, 85 that were all with a, you know, same type of design? Like I would buy that in a heartbeat. I also, being that the A7CR has become like my everyday camera, I would love to see an 85 that's small, like the 50 f2.5. I would love to see a small 85 2.2 or, you know, 2.5, like even a 85 2.8, if they can make it small to complement that body. I would love to see that. Other lenses for next year for 2024, I would love to see more STF lenses. I love the 100 millimeter f2.8 G Master. I would love to see more of that. You know, I would even say not to stick to that 85 millimeter focal length, but if they did something like that with an 85, that would be pretty sweet. I would look at that. It's so tough now because like they have so many great lenses in so many different focal lengths that now it's like anything that I want, it's not like it would be so special because they already have stuff, you know, like I just bought the 35 1.8 after all this time. and I have the 35 G Master, but there's times where I need a second lens, and I didn't want to buy another 35 1.4, so I bought the 1.8, and it works great. But other lenses, I would have to revisit that video that I made to see if there was any other lenses that I talked about that didn't come out. But I feel like anything in that baby prime category, like the 24G, the 40G, the 50G, anything in that lineup, if they come out with other focal lengths, I want that. That's what I would love to see. Are you a hybrid shooter or mostly a photographer? I would consider myself to be a hybrid shooter these days, just out of necessity. Being here on YouTube and having to create content, you kind of have to be a hybrid shooter, you know. And honestly, I mean, I tell people this all the time. If you're a photographer and you're not on social media and you're not on YouTube, you are missing out. I've had opportunities to work with clients and different companies, and they've worked with me for the sole reason that I'm on YouTube and that I have a following here. And I remember, you know, I've been seeing a lot of models jump onto this trend as well. When I was in New Jersey and I started working with different agencies in New York, I remember this must have been like 2014, 2015, that a lot of the agencies, when they would send me their package of like different models that I can choose from, it was weird at the time, and now it's like the standard, it's the norm. But at the time, they would send me the model's profile, and then it would show the number of Instagram followers they had. And I remember thinking, like, why would I care how many Instagram followers they have? Right. And you have to think of what Instagram was at that time. Like, Instagram was not like it is today, where it's just like, it's dead. It's not really a place for photographers, in my opinion, anymore. It was very much for photographers at that point. And so they would send me these profiles, and it would specifically say, like, oh, this person has 4,000 followers. This person has 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't really care, because I'm like, does the person, would they give the look that I'm trying to go for with the images that I'm trying to shoot for, right? And what was funny was there was a lot of really talented people that I worked with that didn't have very big Instagram following. So, like, to me, it was very separate. Like, the number of followers they had, I could really care less. It was more a matter of, like, when you come here and you shoot with me, can you give me great expressions, or am I going to have to work really hard to pose you every 2 seconds to get good shots? And so, you know, nowadays that's changed quite a bit. It's like a standard thing when you book a model or you work with somebody. Like, if you have a big social media presence, and let's say the running, right? If somebody's looking to hire you as a photographer and they start researching you online, and it's between you and photographer B, and photographer B has a YouTube channel with a big following, or they have an Instagram with a big following, and you're not on the platform at all, social proof is a thing. It is a very real thing in this industry. And you will likely end up losing opportunities to get paid jobs because you're not on these platforms. So, all circling back with being a hybrid shooter, there's no reason not to be a hybrid shooter today. Almost every camera that has come out in the last few years has hybrid shooting capabilities. You can at least shoot in HD. Many of them you could shoot in 4K. Many of them you could shoot 4K 160, or sorry, 120, or 4K 60, right? So a lot of these cameras nowadays are fantastic. So there's no reason not to be a hybrid shooter in 2023 going into 2024. And if you don't jump on board, you're going to find yourself losing opportunities, and you may not even realize it. You may not even have realized you were in the running for a certain job in your local market, because they wouldn't even reach out, because they already reached out to somebody else who has that social proof, who has that social media following. So I'm a hybrid shooter. I'm proud of that. I think that if you're not a hybrid shooter in 2024, you're going to get left behind at some point. You know, the days of these mom and pop photo studios that, you know, they don't do any marketing, they just exist and somehow hope that people will find them. That is not going to last forever. If it's even around now, it's barely got a pulse, you know. That's going to be a big thing. Good question, by the way. After 10 years, Sony full frame, the E-mount is an amazing ecosystem. So many lenses from 12 to 600 millimeters and cameras from 12 megapixels to 61. Glad that I switched to Sony. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, man. It's like, it's an ecosystem, right? People are on and on and on about Apple, right? Their ecosystem. I got iPhone, I got MacBook, I got iMac, I've got the headphones, AirPods, I've got iPads, like, and it's all because of the ecosystem. It's not because any one product is better than some other product. It's because of the ecosystem, right? And for some reason, the same photographers that have Apple and they tout that ecosystem being such a big thing, but yet when they start looking at cameras and they'll start looking at the different brands out there, and it's like, you don't look at the ecosystem there. You don't look to see, like for me, I'm a hybrid shooter. I shoot a lot of video. I look for stuff like what kind of cages are available, what kind of third-party grips are available, thumb grips, you know, just other accessories like straps, batteries, chargers, adapters, like just different things. There's such a deep ecosystem of products with Sony. And I feel like people are still like, oh, well, we're looking at these other systems because, you know, the camera has this and Sony camera doesn't have this. And so I'm going for this system. And it's like, you're missing out. That's all I could say. Like, you are missing out because you're not just buying the camera just for the camera. You're buying it for everything else that the ecosystem gives you. Just like when you buy your iPhone, you're not just buying the iPhone for the iPhone. You're buying it because it exists with this whole suite, with this whole ecosystem of services, of products. I don't know how that, like, how is that not talked about more when it comes to cameras? You know, the only reason is that I think that there's this like fanism with people where it's just like they're just fans of a certain brand for whatever reason, whether it be that that's just all they've ever known, or their parents used it, or their hero photographer uses it, or whatever the case might be. There's just a lot of fans out there of these things that, like, I don't get it. You know, I've never been one. Like, I'm an ambassador for Sony, and I'm not an ambassador for Sony because they pay me some extreme amount of money, because they don't. That would be awesome, but they don't do that. It's easy to be an ambassador for them because they make the products that I love the most, and they have an entire ecosystem. And I love them before they even had that ecosystem, because they had stuff at the time that I couldn't get anywhere else. And now you're starting to see the floodgates open. Like, I've been shooting with Sony for so long. Like, I remember a time when my DSLR friends would be like, oh, you know, you're shooting Sony, man. Are you okay? Like, do you need some money? You can't afford something good? Like, that's how it was back in like 2013, 2014, 2015. When you told people you were shooting Sony, it was like, why in the world would you do that? And here we are now in 2024. The game has changed, you know, and I felt like a lot of the brands were and it's not necessarily the brands. A lot of fans of the brands were putting out these narratives on social media, on YouTube, that, you know, this mirrorless thing is not real, right? It's not something that's going to be the future like they're saying it's going to be. And then 2018, they all decided to jump in. And at that point, Sony had been doing it for so long. They had already built up a lead, not just in the technology side of things, which is debatable whether or not you need the technology or not, but from an ecosystem conversation, from an ecosystem perspective, they still haven't caught up from 2018 to now. And it's going to take them a long time. Like Sony is so far, so far ahead in terms of the ecosystem that it would be near impossible, I think, unless they just started churning out products just for the sake of churning it out. It's going to be very hard for any other companies to catch up. And now what's hilarious to me with having this A9 III, I feel like it's a very appropriate thing to say. First, full frame camera with a global shutter. And you have all these conversations, all these people talking about, oh, base 250 ISO, and oh, you need to have, there's no flashes that will basically dump all of its power at, the shutter speeds that this camera can capture. And, a lot of fake news and a lot of, contradictions and a lot of just, a lot of the same kind of talk that I remember hearing back in the DSLR days when mirrorless was starting to emerge, where people just downplayed the technology and they're like, it's not a big deal. Oh, that's never going to catch on. Oh, that's not a big thing. Mirrorless won, DSLR discontinued, lenses, you don't see them being made. And the thing is, this isn't a surprise to anybody who's been shooting full frame Sony cameras from the beginning. They're like, of course this was going to happen, right? But the narratives didn't line up with that reality. Here we are now with the A9 III. I've used the A9 III now for several weeks. Is it going to be the camera that I personally own and buy? I don't know. Maybe not. I love my A7R5, right? I love the resolution that I'm getting. Are there situations and certain types of images that I could see creating with this camera that I can't create with an A7R5, or maybe that would take more work to create with an A7R5? Yeah. There's going to be times where I'll probably have to rent this camera to do the types of shoots that I want to do, right? I also can see a time where global shutter becomes the norm. If you can get, here's the thing, and I think this is another part of this conversation people don't understand. If you can have less moving parts in a camera, you're going to be better off as a consumer because there's less that can break, right? So I could see a time where global shutter is going to become the norm. The benefits that it brings to the table is going to become harder to dispute. And yeah, I mean, at this point, you're not seeing other companies talking about doing global shutter anything, right? They're still, and that's fine. And I'm not saying that other types of sensors are not, going to be good. But, I do see that in the next 8 to 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if global shutter was the norm. Like that was just the way that cameras are made. Kind of like back in the day with CCD cameras, and how like now you can't buy cameras with a CCD sensor. All of them are CMOS, so I feel like global shutter is going to be very similar to that, where everything is just going to have a global shutter, and the benefits that you're going to get are going to be crazy. And it's going to be, honestly, I think it's one of those technologies to where, smartphones for a while have been very intriguing for a lot of people because you always have your phone with you. And obviously by extension, you always have a camera with you. And for most people, they can get a better photo with a cell phone than they could if they got, this style of a camera, unless they're photographers and they want to take the time to learn. But I think that the gap between what global shutter can give a photographer versus what they can get with a smartphone sensor, it's going to widen that gap to where more people might see the benefit of getting a camera with this kind of technology than they would saying, oh, I'm just going to leave this at home and just use my smartphone. That's my personal take. I would love to hear what y'all think about that. Leave a comment. Again, it's an open dialogue and open discussion. And you know what? We've had a lot of good questions throughout the day today. I mean, I've been streaming now for about 2 hours, and it's been a lot of fun. You know, any other questions that you all have, let me know in the comment section. But the main thing that I can tell you is that, you know, in regards to this technology, there's still a lot to learn. You know, I've been testing out this camera with different flashes. I did the Profoto D2, Westcott FJ 400, Westcott FJ 82, 80 Mark II, the Sony speed lights. Tried a $30 Amazon speed light that's discontinued in my most recent video. So I've been using a lot of different flashes. I used a Stella, one of their reflex lights during the launch. I've tried my Rotolite Innova Pro 3. And in pretty much every circumstance, in every case, I can get an exposure with this camera at shutter speeds that have never been possible. I still haven't even fully grasped the ramifications of that. I suspect there's situations that I haven't even thought of where I could use that type of technology. And to be honest with you, after hours of conversations with different people, and of course my own personal testing, I don't even know still without a doubt how it works. You know, like I have my suspicions on what I see happening. And so I have a video coming out probably in the next week or so. That's going to be a follow-up to my last video, where I kind of talk about what my findings have been. But yeah, I feel like this camera has really kind of taken me back to the old school of like when I first started to learn how to use flash and how I first, you know, started to learn photography and how everything was exciting because I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know it worked this way. Global Shutter has introduced certain features and benefits that like took me back where I'm just like, I still don't know how this works, but it's really exciting that it's a possibility that it could do all these things. Like it's been crazy. All the best for you and your family. Merry Christmas. Yes, Merry Christmas to you as well. I hope that this season brings you everything that you have ever wanted, and that more importantly, that you could be happy and healthy going into the new year. That's the most important thing. Happy Christmas to you and yours as well, Dave in Portland. From 1992 until 2017, I was all Canon. 2017, I bought two A7 IIs. I now have an A7 IV. I couldn't go anywhere else after shooting Sony. Yeah, you know, that was the thing for me. I came from shooting Canon as well. And, you know, at the time, it was fine. Like I worked professionally, and I was able to do all the stuff that I wanted to do. I flirted with Sony at the time, you know, in terms of like buying a camera, and I actually just kept all my Canon glass at the time because I think there was only like 6 or 7 full frame lenses when I jumped onto the system. So there wasn't a lot of options. And here we are now a few years later, and there's hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of different lenses. So, you know, and I feel like the thing for me that kind of cemented my my decision to continue using Sony products was in seeing that 2016, 2017, the narratives around mirrorless and how the other, like the competition was basically downplaying mirrorless. And they're like, ah, it's not going to be a thing. Oh, the quality's not as good and blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't true. And then they jump into the mirrorless game, and then they discontinue all the DSLR stuff. And it's like, what happened to all that other stuff you were saying for all those years about it not being as good as you say it is, you know? And so for me, that, I don't know, that just kind of gave me a bad taste in my mouth back in the day. Customers don't know the difference, but I do. I still have all of my Canon L lenses, still like Sony and Tamron mounts better. Yeah, I mean, you know, nowadays the adapters are really good. So even if you still have those old Canon lenses, and if you're in a pinch, you could take an adapter, pop it onto your Sony camera body, and the autofocus is at least as good as it was on a DSLR, if not better. Georgina, how's it going? I need to build shelves like yours to showcase my collection of vintage cameras. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you. So funny enough, these shelves are actually the IKEA Billy bookcases. And if I had to do it over again, I probably would not have purchased the white ones. I thought that I wanted my studio to have this like kind of bright white aesthetic. And then now I'm kind of like, I kind of want the darker aesthetic. So I don't know. Let me know what y'all think about this setup in the background. But they do make the darker brown, it almost looks black bookcases. And I kind of wish I got those. But the white ones, these actually dropped in price. They're only like $85 or something like that. You might want to check IKEA.com. But they're really inexpensive now. And so, yeah, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have 8 here, and I've got 1 in the lobby. And I'll probably end up having to buy maybe a couple more because off camera, let me see if I can see off camera. There's still some more. That's actually the last shelf there. So yeah, I've got quite a few cameras that unfortunately I've had to like just double and triple them up on the same shelf just for space. But that's what happens when you start going down this rabbit hole of, you know, buying vintage cameras. You start just becoming like a diehard collector. Ooh, speaking of diehard collection, hold on. So like, so for example, let me put this off camera. So this was a 16 millimeter Minolta camera that I picked up from a thrift store. You know, it's a common old vintage camera. These are like little spy cameras that you know, for its time, like it was really impressive. But so I got this, put it in my collection, and then all of a sudden I see an auction online for this guy. I don't know if you could see, but it's gold, a gold Minolta 16. And it's rare. Not too much info about it. Looks super beautiful. And it works, which is really nice. Yeah, for me, like this has been my hobby over the last like year and a half, has just been going out and just finding some of these vintage cameras, and man, it's so fun. Like this is exciting for me. Super, super exciting. And it got to the point, obviously, I mean, you could see I have a lot of cameras back here, but and there's still much more to go. My goal is this picture that's on the wall right there. That is basically every Minolta camera that has been made, and going all the way back from 1928. And my goal has been to basically have every single one of those cameras. And so maybe for some people, you're like, man, that's a lot of cameras. Some of these cameras you could buy for like $5 or $10. You know, some of them you'll have to spend more because they're rare. But yeah, I've been enjoying it. Thank you for shouting out the collection. I see you use Westcott strobes, which I own as well. Am I losing anything for not using a Sony Speedlight? I use Westcott because the ecosystem of using one trigger for Speedlight and strobes. Are you losing anything? It depends on how you use your lights, and it depends on what camera you have. Because, for example, with the Alpha 9 III, if you use the 60 RM2, I believe you can get like 20 frames per second with the flash, and I'm pretty sure you can't get that using Westcott, at least not yet. Maybe with firmware updates or something, maybe that could be a possibility. But you know, so that's one thing. The other thing is that you have the ability to control the flash through the menus in the camera, which is also kind of cool. whether or not you're losing anything. I mean, I think there are different systems for different purposes. Obviously, with Westcott, you have a bunch of different flashes available. They have a bunch of modifiers. What I personally appreciate with the Westcott stuff is that over the years, I've used different lights. So like I started off way back in the day with Alien Bees, and the mount for Alien Bees is not used by anyone else. So when I switched over to Photoflex, they used Bowen's mount, which is by far the most common mount out there for these lights. And so all the modifiers that I bought for my Alien Bees, I couldn't use anymore. And I had to go sell them, and then you lose money on that, so on and so forth. What I love about the Westcott stuff is that if I was to go, I'm not doing it, but let's just say for argument's sake, I went to go shoot Alien Bees again. I could buy an Alien Bee speed ring and still keep my modifier that I paid hundreds of dollars for, right? So for me, I personally love the Westcott ecosystem, not just for what it offers now, but for that flexibility that, for example, in my studio, I still have Profoto lights that I love and I use all the time. I could take that same modifier and I could put a Profoto speed ring and I could use it. That alone for me is worth its weight in gold. Like it's huge. Merry Christmas, Facebook user. Need lights in the cabinet. So I do have lights in the cabinet. Where's the remote? I don't have the remote. You probably can't see it, but there's like these little hockey puck looking lights. And what had happened was I bought them, and in the videos you would see the flicker from the light, because apparently they're like cheapo LED lights. And so you would see the flicker. So I just stopped using them. So now I basically bought like, I don't know, 6 or 7 boxes of these like little hockey puck LED lights to light up the cabinet. And unfortunately, they're not flicker free. And so in the background, you basically see the lights flickering, and it didn't look good. So yeah, would like to be able to present them differently. Like honestly, the way I was planning on doing it was to have like glass displays, but it's really hard to find these types of displays at like a consumer level. I guess most everybody who buys them, they have like a storefront or whatever, and because of that, a glass display could be like $1,000 or something crazy. So I don't even think I probably do have over $1,000 worth of cameras up there, but to think that the display cabinets would cost more than the cameras themselves, to me, is just, it doesn't seem like a good deal or a good value to me. So, but yeah. Let's see. Dell, how's it going? Good evening from the UK. It's already evening there. It is 4 o'clock here on the East Coast. So I've got a few more minutes here. If y'all have any other questions, A93 questions, general photography questions, anything of the sort, happy to answer those things. Yeah, so I actually was doing that. There was a couple of stores locally here in Orlando. Obviously, with the pandemic, a lot of stores have been closing. So I've been going to those stores when they do their closeouts and they sell all the shelving and stuff like that. And what I noticed was that a lot of the displays that they had for sale, these displays must have been like 10 plus years old. So they're all scratched up, and I don't know. I guess for the vintage aesthetic, that's probably fine. But I think from the YouTube aesthetic perspective, it would look kind of weird, I guess, to have like scratched up displays and things like that. But I'm still looking. I would love to be able to find some good, some decent displays. Is the A93, in your opinion, a real option for video shooters, or would you prefer a dual base ISO camera over the global shutter? Is it a real option? Yes, would be the simple answer. So I'm very sold on the FX series for video. So For anything outside of that, like for me personally, I would still prefer to use even like an FX3 for video over A9 III. But again, I mean, it just depends on the individual user. You know, if I was shooting a lot of sports, it would be a really great hybrid camera because it's going to give me the best opportunity to capture that like decisive moment while also giving me like a crop free experience when I shoot video. So it just depends, you know. I personally, I still prefer the FX series for video, basically, is the long story short. Have you ever used the Elechrome ecosystem? Do you like it? I have used the Elechrome, what is it, the 1200? I've used it in the past and didn't end up keeping it. So that's kind of been the extent of it. At the time, I felt like Profoto was putting out more in terms of just different options for lighting. And for me, I knew that Elechrome had really good modifiers, and I knew that was kind of their thing. But they didn't really have too many options for lighting. And then they kind of had this alliance with Photics and I forgot the other brand. It was almost like an L-mount alliance of sorts, but it was with lighting manufacturers. And they were basically like the top dog of that alliance. And I just felt like that kind of maybe brought them down a little bit. They didn't really put out very much in terms of lighting that I thought was interesting. So I haven't seen any of their stuff, in all honesty, in the last like 4 years, though. So maybe that's not true today. But from what I remember in the 2010s, they didn't have anything that was super exciting for me. I would still prefer a Westcott system over the Elechrome that I remember, like 50-1. Let's see. Love the features of the A9 III, but shame wasn't a few more pixels. So I love the high resolution stuff. That's why the A7R5 is like my go-to, and the A7CR is my go-to for the everyday stuff. But you know, I'm thinking over the course of the last few years, like back when I shot DSLR, I had a 24 megapixel DSLR, and I had a photo that I took for a pastor and his wife of a local church that they had printed on a billboard. So we're talking like a billboard, and 24 megapixels was enough. I think of like the more recent stuff I've been doing where I've been taking some of these old Sony cameras that are 2 and 3 megapixels and doing photo shoots with them and posting images on my Instagram. And you would be hard pressed to immediately identify which camera it was that was shot at 5 megapixels. And oftentimes we take that 60 megapixel photo from the A7R5 and we bring it down to 1 megabyte or 2 megabytes so we could post it online. So all that to say that I don't think that the 24 megapixel sensor on the A9 III is a problem, given all the additional benefits that you get with the camera. You know, would it be better with a few more pixels? Sure. I mean, you know, sure. Like more is always, I'm not going to say more is always better, but more is usually better. But that doesn't mean that for what it is, that it's not good, you know? I agree with you. I love the features that it has. I'm sure if it had a few more pixels, it probably would be a few $1,000s more, you know? And I tell you, inflation is crazy these days, you know? It's so funny to me, like when you're seeing the pricing differences between like an A9 II and an A9 III, you know, people are like, wow, you know, it's so much more. But I'm pretty sure that if you look at inflation, it's probably like I'm sure $6,000 today is pretty close to what $4,500 was back in 2017, or when did A92, like 2018-ish? Maybe y'all are online right now. You could go into that inflation calculator. Let me know. 6,000 today, what would that be worth in 2018 money, right? Pre-inflation. So I'm sure they're pretty they're very, very close. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it would be cool if it had more pixels, but to be honest with you, 24 megapixels is enough. We have A7S III with 12 megapixels, and that thing is, I mean, I sold my A7S III for full retail, and it was used at a time when like you couldn't even buy one. Like they were just out of stock. They were back ordered for like 6 months or something. And I was like, you know what? I'm still using my FX cameras more than anything, so I sold it. But and that's 12 megapixels. So let's see. Yeah, so currently shooting it for Equine. Is that like the horses? It'll be interesting to see what the next A1 will have. The costs are stupid in UK. Yeah, I don't know how inflation is with the euro, but I know here in the US, it's pretty crazy here too. Yeah, that's the world we live in today. Not to get political, but that's just where we're at. It would be worth greater sanity. Hold on, let me go back. I don't know what you're talking about, but I agree. Anything is worth greater sanity. Yeah. So anyway, going back, because I know some people have jumped onto the live stream, so I just want to make sure I get this back out. With this being the last live stream, going into 2023, the plan is going to be, I started YouTube memberships on my YouTube channel. So if you see there's a join button, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can actually join and become a member. And the plan is going to be that you'll have early access to my videos, because oftentimes I have videos kind of just ready and I'm just waiting for the right time and date to post them. So as a member, you'll get early access to those videos, unless it's a new product. Like if it's a new product, there's an embargo, so you won't get early access to those things because contractually you can't. But I'm also going to be making videos on certain topics that are requested by members. So if you have a specific question that you wanted to get an answer to, I'll be able to do that through the membership site. But what I'm most excited for is that I'm going to start doing live streams once a month. And those live streams are going to be for that tier of membership only. So, you know, in my head, like by the end of 2024, there should be maybe 10 people that are at that tier. And maybe I'm wrong. Feel free to prove me wrong. But if we have 10 people at that tier, you know, that's a pretty close-knit group for a workshop. So, you know, if you have questions, if you want to see like, oh, you're shooting with this lens, but what would it look like if you shot it with this lens? Like I could actually go in real time, swap out the lens, take the photos, and then you could see what that looks like. Or if I'm shooting with a beauty dish and you're like, oh, Miguel, what would it look like with an umbrella? We could swap it out and we could see what that would look like. So it's almost as if you were here with me doing the photo shoot, but you get to do it from the comforts of your own home, which is pretty sweet. So that's going to be one of the things that I'm offering on these memberships. It's going to officially launch in, it's available now if you want to sign up, but the content is going to start streaming through in January. What's great about the memberships as well is that it's going to, in time, lower the dependence on sponsored content. So, you know, I'm very happy that sponsors support my ability to be able to come to you and make these videos. But I would eventually like to switch from sponsor support to member supported content. I don't know what that's going to look like, but in a perfect world, that's the dream. let's see, $4,000 in 2010 is worth $5,632 today. So there you go. So, a lot of this, and again, it's very disingenuous when someone says like, oh my gosh, the A9 III is $6,000. That's crazy. The 2 was only $4,500. Money changes, the value of money changes with inflation, right? There's a reason why, like, you can't go and buy gas for 95 cents. Like when I first started driving, a gallon of gas was less than $1. I remember driving past some gas stations that were selling it for like 102, like $1.02. And I'm like, man, those people must be really proud of their gas. That's like something my dad used to always say. Anything that was expensive, he would say, they must be really proud of whatever it is to be selling it for so much more. Yeah, and so like people don't understand that inflation is a thing, so that $6,000 today is probably very close to the $4,500 that A9 II was back in 2018. So interesting. But nobody wants to say that because it's more fun to just like clickbait people and just, go on rants about how this stuff is just so much more expensive. Anyway, so we've been here for about 2.5 hours. I appreciate y'all. If you have been watching from the very beginning of this live stream, just drop a me in the comments because I appreciate you. You're my ride or dies. I have a few more videos coming out over the course of, we're on the 22nd right now. So between now and the 31st, I have several videos that I'm aiming to drop on this channel. But because this is the last live stream of the year, and I probably won't see you live, whatever holidays it is that you celebrate, I hope you enjoy the holidays. For those of you that celebrate Christmas like I do, Merry Christmas to all of you. I don't know how your 2023 has been. I know for me, I had my second child in 2023. So family life has changed quite a bit. Business has been interesting, and it's shifted quite a bit in 2023. Health has changed. I'm sure you're watching this video, and if you remember seeing my content from like pre-pandemic, you might be like, damn, Miguel, you got kind of chunky. So, on the health side of things, health could always be better, and I'm working towards that in the new year. But, I'm just happy and just very thankful to, just be here and to have the opportunity to do a live stream and talk to anyone, talk to y'all wherever it is that y'all are in the world watching. So, with that being said, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. My birthday, by the way, is the day after Christmas. So if you want to get me a present, just join, become if you're watching and you're not subscribed, subscribe at a bare minimum. If you want to join and become a member, if you want to give me a gift that gives back to you, that'd be a pretty cool gift. A simple happy birthday would be nice on a video as well. But if I don't see you for the rest of the year, again, I hope y'all enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to the new year. I'm looking forward to, everything that's coming in the new year. And, if you're in a situation right now to where things are not looking up, maybe you lost the job, maybe you lost the relationship, whatever the case might be, you may not hear it from anyone else. So I'm going to go ahead and say it now. As long as you're alive and you're still breathing, there's an opportunity for change. There's an opportunity for better things to come. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in the life of many other people, or the lives of many other people. And so keep on keeping on, right? If you desire to have photography take you to, new opportunities and new places, just understand that could very much happen for you. And you just have to put your head down, keep going forward. It's going to be a new year, new opportunities, new possibilities. And I personally am excited to see what's going to happen in the new year, not just for myself, but for all of you out there as well. And so, yeah, with that being said, love y'all. Hope you all enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the holidays. And I'll see you for a live stream in 2024. So see y'all later.